Good evening. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin of the New York Times and CNBC. It is my privilege to be filling in for Charlie Rose tonight, who is on assignment. The media's coverage of the presidential campaign has been a topic of heightened interest throughout the primary and general election season. Donald Trump's handling of the press was no doubt a decisive factor in his path to securing the Republican nomination. This week, Hillary Clinton's health is now the latest source of rampant speculation after delay in revealing that she had pneumonia. Brian Stelter is the host of CNN's Reliable Sources, which examines the week's top media stories each Sunday. From Los Angeles, Ben Shapiro. He is a columnist, author, and editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire. He was formerly a top editor at Breitbart News, and I am pleased to have both of them with me. Brian, let me start with you, and let me start with the issue of Hillary Clinton's health. There was a lot of speculation about Hillary Clinton's health in the news media prior to the revelation of these images, prior to her disclosure about pneumonia. You called some of the speculation back then reckless. You called Sean Hannity specifically reckless. Now that this news is out there, was it still reckless?
Some of these figures feel vindicated today, and I don't think they should. Baskets are a popular phrase. Let's use baskets for this. There's a basket of legitimate questioning about Hillary Clinton's health. And some conservative commentators and media figures fit into that basket. They're right to wonder about her health in some cases. But then there's this other basket, a truly deplorable basket. Sean Hannity fits into it. So does Rush Limbaugh, Alex Jones, and others. These are people who bring up rumors and innuendo about Clinton's health and have been doing it for years. I'm not saying Hannity or Limbaugh fit into this necessarily, but some of these figures want her to be sick. They want her to be dying. They want her to be on her deathbed. It's wishful thinking. And that's some of this BS that's on the web, that's on Facebook. And the problem in media today is this stuff then populates our Facebook feeds and our Twitter feeds. And it becomes this innuendo that we don't just see on the front page of the National Enquirer, which is an offender here, but also then seeps into the public discourse. And that's why I think the Hannitys of the world were irresponsible. Let
me ask you a different question. Do you think the quote-unquote mainstream media should have been asking questions about her health before?
I think the mainstream media was asking those questions. It wasn't necessarily all broadcast, right? But I do think many reporters had been questioning her health, especially with her coughing fits and things like that. It is interesting, though, to think about Friday to Sunday of last week when she was diagnosed with pneumonia. The reporters did not know until Sunday. Partly that's because the campaign kept it a secret, and partly it's because it's very hard to get inside the inner circle of the campaign. And maybe on Saturday and Sunday morning, reporters should have been trying harder to get that information. But it is disturbing the campaign withheld it, and it's disturbing the campaign kept the press in the dark for 90 minutes when she left the 9/11 memorial.
Ben, you're listening to Brian here, and I'm curious. I'm curious where you land on this issue.
You know, when it comes to the media coverage of this, no, I don't think the media were asking appropriate questions about Hillary Clinton's health. Chris Chaliza of the Washington Post 6 days ago, wrote a column about why we shouldn't be asking any questions about Hillary Clinton's health. Then she collapses, and all of a sudden, it's perfectly legitimate. You know, are you going to release your health records? Why do you have a consistent record of hacking this much? And again, none of that is illegitimate. I agree with Brian that baseless speculation, that there are these videos that go around saying she has Parkinson's disease or MS. I mean, all this is nonsense.
Exactly.
Having doctors on the air to try and diagnose Hillary based on the fact that there's tape of her coughing is silliness. I mean, my wife is a doctor currently in residency, and she wouldn't be diagnosing people based on 30-second clips of them online.
So then what's the appropriate way to do it, though?
Deplorable behavior. It's the difference between reporting and rumor mongering, and there's been too much wishful thinking, rumor mongering. What we need is less guessing and more reporting.
Brian.
This is Jim Rudenberg in the New York Times. He writes a column called "Trump is Testing the Norms of Objectivity in Journalism." He says, balance has been on vacation since Mr. Trump stepped onto his golden Trump Tower escalator last year to announce his candidacy. Democrats say that Trump has gotten $2 billion in free advertising, free media.
Free coverage, yeah.
Republicans say that Mr. Trump has gone unchallenged. And I'm going to go to Ben first. Do you think there is true and utter bias in the media?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's bias in two directions.
Do you think it's a conscious bias?
Yeah, well, certainly, yes, obviously there is some conscious bias in the media. And then there's kind of the generalized unconscious bias. Most of the people who are in the mainstream media are people who are Democrats and will vote for Hillary Clinton come November, and they don't reveal that before they go on air. And so, yes, unconscious bias has an impact on how people perceive these particular issues. CNN, MSNBC have run chyrons fact-checking Trump. There's never been a chyron on CNN or MSNBC fact-checking Hillary Clinton. So that's bias in one direction. In the other direction, I'll say that there's sort of been and this is true for the Trump campaign, there's been this kind of unconscious lowering of the standard of decent behavior for Trump, in the sense that if Donald Trump shows up in Mexico and doesn't really do anything supremely noteworthy, this is considered a major victory for his campaign. If he goes into the debate with Hillary Clinton and doesn't act like an insane loon bag, then that will be a big win for him. So there's sort of a lowering of the standard, because the new standard for normal campaigning has been left behind. I mean, if they held Donald Trump to Mitt Romney's standards, then there's no way that he would have gotten nearly this far.
Brian, you think the media is truly down the middle, if you will?
I think there's a complicated definition of fairness in this election. Not all lies, not all misstatements are created equal. And so sometimes you look at the chyron, the banner on the bottom of the screen, it may not be fact-checking a Hillary Clinton lie, because that lie may be more complicated, may be more nuanced, may take a whole lot more explanation versus some of what Trump has said. I think in this election, fairness does not mean 50-50 coverage of each candidate and 50-50 treatment. These candidates are not equal. They are not even in that way. And I think Ben is right. There's been a lower standard of treatment for Donald Trump.
If you believe that Donald Trump has gone unchallenged, why do you think that's the case?
No, I think he has been challenged many times, but the treatment is different for a couple of different reasons. Number one, he has been up until recently very accessible to television networks in particular. He's at the same time simultaneously running a TV-driven campaign, media-driven campaign, and an anti-media campaign. This is the definition of having it both ways. He attacks the press on a daily basis, and there are reasons to think he's a true threat. There are reasons to think he's a true threat to press freedom, even though he has recently relaxed his so-called blacklist of some news outlets. So that is all true. At the same time, he's been very accessible, answers lots of questions, and can be held.
And to the extent that people think that he has gone unchallenged, it is because of his accessibility he's gone unchallenged?
I think it's because of this saturation, this saturated news environment we live in. You may read 100 stories where it feels like Trump is being let off the hook, where it seems like the press is going easy on Trump. There's 100 other stories elsewhere on your Facebook feed where he's being severely scrutinized, rigorously covered. We live in a choose-your-own-adventure, choose-your-own-news environment, which makes it increasingly difficult for the audience at home to get through the reality of the situation.
Ben, I'm assuming that the assertion that there is balance in the coverage of Trump, or that he has gone unchallenged, you will disagree with.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wildly disagree with that. I mean, he's gone challenged on virtually everything. The problem with Trump is that he gives 10 different positions for the same issue, and so it makes it difficult for anybody to finally get down to, okay, what does he actually believe about something, because he'll just shift on a dime, and we've seen him do this in debate, so that's a challenge for the media for sure. But the idea that Hillary Clinton gets off scot-free because her scandals are just too complicated, I mean, the fact is that Hillary Clinton's scandals are not very complicated at all. She created a private server.
I'm talking about the banners on the bottom of the screen. Certainly,
I know. I mean, she'll say things like, but she'll say things like, I never had classified material on my server, and the FBI said, no, you did have classified material on your server, and in the chyron underneath will say Clinton, no classified material on my server, and then there's no parentheses that says not true, but they'll do that with Trump all the time. I mean, so this sort of quasi, even-handed treatment, it doesn't really exist. I mean, Trump is always perceived to be fibbing, and sometimes that's true. A lot of the time he is fibbing. With Hillary, she's always perceived to be telling the truth, and then later, if it turns out she's lying, then the media sort of retroactively rush to cover it. This is what happened with the health situation. It's what happened with the email server situation. For months, all we heard about the email server was that it wasn't a big deal until the FBI revealed that it actually was kind of a big deal.
I don't know what shows you were watching, but what I hear sometimes is a victimization narrative from conservatives. I would just point out there are many liberals who are equally frustrated by news coverage this year. I'm interested, Andrew, in how much anxiety and fear there is, outright fear among liberals about the prospect of a Donald Trump candidacy, and how that's being, they're taking that out on the media in many cases.
Let me ask you this. Both of you have talked about this issue of fact-checking. And I wonder how you feel, or what you feel the role of the journalist is supposed to be. We have a series of debates coming up. Chris Wallace from Fox News is going to be one of those moderators.
Right.
He recently said truth squatting was not his responsibility, that he didn't see the idea of fact-checking on the fly being something that he should be doing. It's a show, don't tell approach. What do you think the role of the journalist is supposed to be when it comes to these upcoming debates?
We work for the viewer at home. We work for the reader who's reading our work. To the extent that the viewer is misinformed by a candidate, the moderator needs to help the audience understand what the truth is. Sometimes that can mean going to the other candidate and making sure the other candidate rebuts it. Sometimes that can be with a carefully crafted follow-up question, as you do on CNBC. The follow-up question can be the fact check. But sometimes I think the moderator will have to step in and explain what the facts are. The reality is, again, not all lies are created equally. Sometimes it is very hard to fact check what a grayscale story is, but some stories are black and white. And that's why Donald Trump is a unique challenge. You could argue he's the biggest journalistic challenge of this decade. It's not that Clinton should be let off scot-free. She shouldn't be. She does make misstatements. But Trump is uniquely challenging. Then you add Clinton to the stage, and this is the hardest task these debate moderators have faced in modern times.
Ben, the role of a journalist, the responsibility as these debates approach us?
I mean, I think that the role of the journalist in this particular case when it comes to the debates is going to be asking the follow-up questions. And I think that there are a lot of these fact-checkers out there, including organizations like factcheck.org, that do have a bias and where they'll simply grant certain amounts of credibility to candidates based on the political appeal of those candidates or the political leanings of those candidates. It's dangerous to me to have a moderator up there who says, you know, Donald Trump, what you're saying about Vladimir Putin isn't true. Hillary Clinton, what you're saying about your emails is or isn't true, because there are many interpretations, unfortunately, of a lot of these issues. But it would be good to be able to say, you know, Donald, you weren't saying this a year ago. Here's a clip of you not saying this a year ago. And let's stop pretending that this is that difficult a job. It really isn't. We've seen these candidates for a year. It isn't in the sense that we know what they're going to say. I mean, if you've been watching Donald Trump for a year, you can predict what Donald Trump is going to say before he says it. And Hillary Clinton is absolutely predictable. So if you know what they're going to say, you should have a well-crafted follow-up prepared for every one of your questions if they say what you think they're going to.
If the moderators don't step in, what I would say is the television networks, major papers have a real responsibility, even more than normal, to provide fact-checking to the audience right after these debates. And then, of course, it's on the viewers at home. It's on the readers at home to actually check, to actually follow up, to actually look into the information ourselves. I know that we are so divided. We are so on our own sides right now as tribes. But the information's out there if we want it. There's more information available on these candidates than ever before, but we have to work harder to access it.
Let me ask you a question about the mainstream media, and I'm looking at you because you work at CNN. Mainstream media. There's an argument that has been made that the mainstream media has not been aggressively covering Hillary Clinton, and that much of the most aggressive coverage has actually emanated from some of what might be described as a conservative or right-wing media. I'm thinking of organizations like Judicial Watch, which FOIA, Freedom of Information requests for some of her emails, for example. Do you think that's a fair assertion?
I think to some degree it is, and that's a valuable part of the media ecosystem, right? We're better off to have outlets that are explicitly conservative in this country, like Fox News and others. We're also better off because there's explicitly liberal outlets like Salon and Salon and Talking Points Memo and places like that. We're better off to have that diversity and that variety. But I would point out the New York Times assigned Amy Chozick to the Clinton beat years ago. The CNN assigned reporters to the Clinton beat years ago, and there have been thorough investigations from mainstream media.
Absolutely.
There's just this distinction between outlets that come with a point of view, like Fox News, and outlets that try not to come with a point of view.
Ben, I'm assuming you think nobody comes without a point of view.
Well, I mean, I think obviously trying to separate, using Brian's language, Fox News into the opinionated basket and CNN into the non-opinionated basket. I think anybody who objectively views both networks understands that there's an editorial bent to both of those networks. When it comes to, you know, the idea that let 1,000 flowers bloom when it comes to the media, obviously I agree. But I would point out a distinction. I mean, Brian, you sort of shifted away from the fact that Judicial Watch was named there. Judicial Watch has done most of the heavy lifting on a lot of the Clinton documentation here. Judicial Watch is not a media outlet. Judicial Watch is a 501c3 organization that FOIAs a lot of these documents from the federal government. And why the Washington Post wasn't doing that, or the New York Times, or you at CNN weren't doing that, is a question that really ought to be looked at.
Well, where I disagree with you is that Judicial Watch now is a media outlet, that all of these groups are media outlets in the way the Media Matter as a nonprofit is. I would also say Donald Trump's campaign and Hillary Clinton campaigns are media outlets, as Ben Smith from BuzzFeed and others have pointed out.
Well,
all of these outlets now are media outlets, but we should take that seriously because that's been a change. But that's been a change in our media ecosystem, that all of these outlets now, all these nonprofits, all these companies are media outlets. Again, it's harder for the audience at home. I think it puts more of the onus on us to sort through it all.
Okay, but the fact is that Judicial Watch, the way the Judicial Watch works, and I know this because I know the folks at Judicial Watch, is if they actually receive documents from a FOIA request, it's not like they have the power of putting it in front of millions of people like CNN does. I mean, they're a 501c3. They pitch their information to media outlets who either then pick it up or don't pick it up. So putting everybody in the media basket basically says there's no such thing as the media. An individual with a cell phone is the media.
Ben, I think you're a media company, and I'm glad you are, because I can subscribe to you now.
Well, I appreciate it, and I hope everybody subscribes to dailywire.com as long as we're pitching things. But, the fact is, I do run a media company, but it's a media company that actually has readers and spends money to market our material, and we actually try and get that out there. Judicial Watch is getting documents from the federal government. Why is it right now we know that the media are trying to unseal Donald Trump's divorce records in the Ivana Trump case? Why weren't they FOIAing Hillary Clinton's State Department records?
The Associated Press was for years. They went to court to get them.
That's
and
true.
Recently did.
The AP was. And the Obama administration was trying to crack down on the AP for various other reasons. So, earlier in this particular segment, you were talking about the fact that you thought that Trump was a threat to press freedom. I don't wholly disagree with that, but the idea that Hillary isn't, when obviously she's been less than forthcoming with the press, and Barack Obama has been maybe the worst guy for the press in the modern presidency, is I think, again, just evidence of maybe bias on your part.
It is not bias on my part. I would agree with you. Clinton is also in some ways a threat. Trump has taken more explicit steps to curtail the press. There are behaviors of his campaign that are more troubling, but Clinton is no friend of the media either, and it would seem that either of these candidates would continue President Obama's troublesome relationship with the media.
Gentlemen, on that note, we are going to have to end the conversation there. I appreciate it. It is a debate that is not going to end anytime soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both.
Thanks so much.